Jeff Gerwich here with Modern Tactical Shooting. Now this is a pretty, I would say, bold video. I'm going to try and capture the history of competitive shooting in Special Forces. Basically what Special Forces guys, how they perceived competitive shooting, its influence in training, and I'm going to tackle the subject, does competitive shooting help or hurt tactical shooters? So let's get into it right now. So the best way to frame this video, it's going to be from my point of view, my experience shooting matches like 3-gun and USPSA pistol during my time while serving in Special Forces. Now, of course, I served in Special Forces from 1998 to 2017, serving in both 5th and 3rd Special Forces Group, and I'll be doing a lot of name dropping in this video of a lot of fellow Green Berets that have contributed to competitive shooting in some form within Special Forces, and they've affected Special Forces because of their contributions to competitive shooting. So this video is going to be from my point of view. I'm going to take it all the way back to 2002 when I shot my very first match. And yes, I'm wearing a rifle here. This is actually the second AR I ever built. I built this around 2006. It was actually the first rifle I started using in matches, so I figured why not show it off in this video. It's gone through many changes. The buttstock, of course, optics have changed throughout the years. But this is the gun that I was using out the gate when I first started to get into, really it was 3-gun matches when it was outlaw 3-gun, back around 2005, 2006. And again, this is the second rifle I ever built and took with me into matches. So I want to go all the way back to 2002. Now at the time, I was going through our primary CQB schoolhouse. It's known as SFARTIC. It's a long acronym. It's basically hostage rescue. I was more than halfway through the course. I had never done any competitive shooting matches. And a fellow student who was a 7th grouper, he invited me to go shoot a USPSA pistol match. I still remember it to this day. It was at Sir Walter Raleigh Gun Club. I showed up at the match. I was shooting a 1911, I think it was my Colt Commander at the time. I don't remember the exact name of the stage, but you started seated at a table. You basically had to retrieve your handgun, shoot 4 targets twice each, perform a mandatory reload, shoot 4 targets again twice each. I did that. I thought I was pretty good. I mean, I'm a commando, Green Beret, tip of the spear at our primary CQB schoolhouse, doing well as a student. What could go wrong? Well, when they went to go score me, they called off 4 mics. And at the time, I was like, hey, what does mic mean? And they were like, well, those are flat out misses. You flat out had 4 misses. And I thought, how can that be? I'm a super great commando. This is impossible. Basically, I let the stress of shooting in front of people I didn't know and the stress of the pro timer affect me, and I came unglued. Now, some might be deterred or dissuaded by that, but it was that moment that I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more about competitive shooting. How can all these civilians, which mostly at the time the match is made up of, how can these mostly civilian shooters be crushing a Green Beret like me when I'm supposed to be best of the best? I was perplexed by that, and I wanted to know more, and that's what cemented me in getting into competitive shooting. I wanted to make myself better and expose that really I was operating in a bubble where people were saying, hey, you're passing these standards, you're a Green Beret, you're able to do this, this, and this, you're awesome. But really, was I really awesome? Apparently no. So it was from that point on, about 2002, I started to get into USPSA matches. I was shooting limited 10, basically a 45 ACP pistol. You were allowed 10-round mags. The first 2 fellow Green Berets I want to mention, one gentleman is named Sean Greenock. He was in 5th group, A15, the SIF or CRIF. He was actually a sniper. He could bring it with a 1911. I started shooting with him. He initially showed me the ropes of competitive shooting. And another gentleman, his name is Ben Fortin. Now Ben showed up to 5th Special Forces Group about a year or 2 after I did. I showed up in 1998. He maybe showed up in 99 or 2000. But we both started heavily getting into shooting USPSA pistol matches. We kind of were learning the ropes together. We really didn't know much about competitive shooting. And I shot with Ben for about 1 or 2 years. We were consistently going the matches together, just trying to learn the sport of competitive shooting with the pistol. Now, during this time period, about 2002 to about 2006, most local matches were about 40 to 70 shooters at most. And really, now regardless where it was, whether it was around Fort Bragg or Fort Campbell, I maybe see a handful, maybe half a dozen military members in the match in total. There was literally only 5 or 6 of us, and that's all I would see for years on end. So not a lot of active duty people shooting matches. And it was during this time when I first started to get into competitive shooting, I heard from a lot of my peers that competitive shooting matches, that's gonna get you killed in combat. It's a game, you're a gamer, and shooting matches is gonna build bad habits and it's gonna get you killed. Now, this is 2002. Some guys had deployed to Afghanistan already, but a lot of Special Forces members had yet to see combat. A lot of my peers had yet to see combat. It wasn't until 2003 when 5th Special Forces Group basically went into Iraq as a whole, and we all got our first taste of combat. But a lot of my peers were poo-pooing competitive shooting, thinking, yeah, bad skills, bad habits you're gonna get out of it. It's a game, you don't learn tactics, and it's gonna get you killed. And I'll address that attitude as we go on throughout this video. But when I first started competitive shooting, I would say more than 50% of fellow Green Berets were against competitive shooting, regardless whether it was 3-gun, USPSA, even IDPA. They all viewed it as a game and it would only build bad habits. Now, another former Green Beret who also had a similar experience with me when it came to what their peers thought about competitive shooting within Special Forces is Mike Green of Green Ops. He's a masterclass shooter. He was in Special Forces a few years prior to me, and here's a little bit about his experience.
I had Sephardic, I trained with 2 IPSC champions, and I just spent a year teaching. I thought I was one of the greatest shooters ever. And then a friend of mine, he introduced me to this guy named Kyle Lamb. And Kyle took me to my first USPSA match. There were a few guys there from his unit, but in general, there was a lot of civilians, hardly any military at all. My first match was a train wreck. I was totally crushed. But even more shocked to find out that one of the best shooters in our squad wasn't even in the military. He was a telephone repairman. I started becoming a regular at matches at that point on, and there were few, if any, SF guys that showed up. Most SF guys made fun of guys that shot competition.
Now, in 2007, I was assigned to Fort Bragg to work at our primary CQB schoolhouse known as Sephardic, and I was selected to be the head marksmanship instructor, and partly that was due to the fact that I could outperform my peers out on the flat range. And why could I do that? Well, it was due to competitive shooting. I could best them when it came to balancing speed and accuracy, regardless of the drills we were doing with rifle and pistol. That's because to do well in a match, to do well in a stage, you've got to basically shoot very fast and very accurately and have great weapon handling skills, like keeping your gun loaded, shooting and moving, performing reloads, getting your gun out of the holster, all those things that make up weapon handling. And I was pretty good due in part to my experience shooting matches already for a few years. And also working at Sephardic was the first time where a lot of my peers, fellow instructors that were working there, were also into competitive shooting. My second in charge, my right-hand man for the flat range program was a gentleman named Mike Duskin. He's a legend in 3rd Special Forces Group, and he can bring it with a pistol. We started hitting matches hard together. In fact, a lot of the instructors there were super into 3-gun and into shooting matches like I was, that we even formed a 3-gun team representing 1st Special Warfare Training Group, basically representing Sephardic. And the chain of command supported us going up and down the East Coast, shooting all the major matches at the time, Fort Benning 3-gun, the Blue Ridge Championship, all the major matches on the East Coast. And we did that for a period of about 2 years. And that was awesome, having Special Forces Command actually support us going out and shooting these matches to represent Special Forces. Now, one thing about Special Forces training, really military training in general, out on the flat range, a lot of soldiers have done stress fires or stress shoots. Well, that's basically no different than any of your stages in competitive shooting. You lay out a bunch of targets, maybe some barriers you got to shoot around or manipulate your weapon around, and you're doing it for time and accuracy. They call it a stress test to test your basic marksmanship skills. It's the same as going out and shooting a stage. So really there's no difference, and you're doing it for time with a pro timer. So it is kind of gamey. Yes, you can throw some tactics into it, but I'll talk about tactics and the correlation between tactics and competitive shooting here towards the end of the video, but basically you're doing the same thing. Now, not only did we have a 3-gun team representing the 1st Special Warfare Training Group, but also we started to run some 3-gun matches out at Range 37. That was really put on by Mike Duskin and another gentleman, a 3rd grouper named Ed Homeyer. I believe he was a 3rd grouper. They started actually put together 3-gun matches out at Range 37. And they weren't your typical 3-gun matches. They had a lot of physical stuff involved, like climbing up the sides of buildings and dragging heavy stuff. Hey, you got to add a little bit of Special Forces flavor into it. But that's another way that competitive shooting was brought into Special Forces. And these matches they put on, they were open to the public, so that was pretty good. Also during this time, not only were we shooting matches representing 1st Special Warfare Training Group, well, our friends over on the Delta side, Tier 1, they were putting on their own matches out at their compound, USPSA pistol matches, and civilians could go out and shoot these matches at their compound. They used to put on one a month, USPSA rules, so you could go out and shoot against Tier 1 guys who were also into shooting matches. So that was pretty cool. We used to go out there in force to try and represent SF, and it was always a good time. Now in 2010, I transferred over to 3rd Special Forces Group, where I asked them, hey, why don't we start a 3-gun shooting team? 3rd Special Forces Group can be representative in competitive shooting. And they said, no way, your job is to deploy and fight the enemy. And I was like, even on the weekends while we're at home? So I had to seek outside sponsorship to continue to shoot these major matches. Because to shoot a major match, it takes a lot of financial investment into it. Match fees usually start around $200 for a major match. You got travel, you got hotel. So just to get to a major match on the East Coast, you're looking at least $500 out the gate, plus ammo for the match, the thousands of rounds of ammo that you're going to be using to practice to be ready for these matches to do well. So it's a lot of an investment, and it does take outside sponsorship if you want to really perform at a high level. Now, back in around 2008, 2009, I had met a fellow soldier out at the matches. His name was Kurt Broyles, and he was representing Adams Arms. Now, Adams Arms was a rifle piston company. They're still around to this day. At the time, it was their 2 founders, Jim Granger and Jason Adams. And he had arranged for some sample guns to be shown off out at our compound. And the 1st generation Adams Arms rifle, I thought was a lot better than the 1st generation HK416. It was a lot smoother, a lot less recoil. The 416 is overgassed. So I thought, yeah, this is a pretty cool rifle. Well, in 2010, I reached out to Jim Granger for support, and yes, he did sponsor a lot of us Green Berets for the Adams Arms 3-gun shooting team. Not only was I in it, another gentleman named Clay Martin, he's retired now, he's a 3rd grouper. He runs off the reservation, he does some other things right now. Another gentleman, Eric Ethart. We had a regular Army guy named TK Martin, he could bring it out at the range. And my good buddy Mike Duskin, who I worked in Sephardic with, while he was representing Barnes Precision Machine, great rifle company, eventually I was able to drag him over to Adams Arms. And I will say this, for quite a while, Adams Arms had not only the most active duty soldiers on their 3-gun shooting team, they can boast the most active duty Special Forces members on their 3-gun shooting team for about 2 or 3 years. We were stacked SF heavy. Now, unfortunately, Mike Duskin was killed in combat in 2012. And really, since then, I've kind of lost the taste to shoot major matches. I would go on and still shoot some major matches to about 2014, but honestly, I've lost the appetite for it. Mike Duskin was one of my best friends ever. We hit all the major matches together, and since his death, I've kind of lost my appetite for it. Now, one thing I did do during one of my deployments, and I started to ramp up on deployments in 2012, 2014, 2015 with 3rd Special Forces Group, is back in 2014, I put on a 2-gun match out in Jalabad. It's called Fob Fenty was the name of the base, but we were assigned to Camp Dyer for Special Forces. I put on a 2-gun match under USPSA multi-gun rules, and I had a ton of sponsors. I basically reached out to Jim Granger back in the States and said, hey, I want to give as many prizes as I can to these soldiers that shoot in this match. And Jim Granger, he really came through for me. If you look at this sponsor sheet right here, this was from back in the match. He reached out and got all these companies to donate certificates or actually send some prizes overseas along with the USO. I think I had about 70 shooters in that match, and I think everybody walked away with some sort of prize. So that's pretty cool. Now, I'm not the first Special Forces guy or Army guy to put on a match in Iraq or Afghanistan, but I wanted to put one on under USPSA rules so a lot of these soldiers who've never shot a match before could see what shooting a match is like, get a break from training or get a break from combat operations, and matches, well, they're a lot of fun. That match in 2014 on Fob Fente, that was a lot of fun. And again, it was around 70 or 80 competitors I had in that, Special Forces guys and Army guys that were stationed at the camp. And we were dragging dummies, shooting around armored vehicles, getting it on with our military service rifles and pistols. Now, in this match flyer right here, again, Adams Arms, they provided a rifle to the winner. Once he got back to the States, he won an Adams Arms rifle, and all these other companies provided prizes. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does the North Florida Oral and Facial Surgery, how do they support the match? Did somebody get free dental care when they got home? No, actually, they were pretty instrumental. They sent over a case of official USPSA targets, and I know that was not cheap. Trying to get them over there in time for the match, I know shipping was probably $400 or $500 to get us a case of targets. I've never thanked them over the phone or anything like that. So if anybody from the North Florida Oral Facial Surgery is watching, thank you for your support back in 2014. It was really instrumental in allowing us to put on that match. Now, it was about 2 years after Mike Duskin's death that some of his former teammates actually started a 3-gun match on Fort Bragg in his honor. It's the Mike Duskin 3-gun match held out at our Special Forces ranges. And it's 3-gun in his honor. Super cool match. You're going to go out and you're going to do things you normally can't do at a normal 3-gun match, like clear real Army shoot houses or shoot from military vehicles. And you're also going to drag chains or carry heavy stuff or be forced to climb walls. So it's a pretty cool match. Mike was never a fan of shotgun when it came to 3-gun, so it's typically a shotgun light match. And every stage in the match is dedicated to a fallen soldier. Now, this match was started by former teammates, and I think it was around 2015-ish, I might have my dates a little off, a gentleman by the name of Ben Blanton, fellow third grouper, he took over for it, and he really started to take that match to another level. It was always open to Special Forces soldiers and some civilians, but the match has just grown over the years, and now it's viewed as a major match for a lot of the civilian shooters trying to shoot the major match circuit here on the East Coast. They want to hit the Mike Duskin 3-gun match just because it's so unique. I shot the first few Mike Duskin 3-gun matches, but honestly, I have not shot one in probably the last 3 or 4 years at least. And that's because it's really just too painful for me to go out there. It brings up a lot of memories of that time. I gave Mike's eulogy. I was his escort back when he came back to the States, back to Fort Bragg. So was his death took a lot out of me. And just going to that match again brings a lot of that back. So I've actually have not gone in the last few years. Again, kind of like shooting major matches, I just kind of lost the taste for it. Now, back in 2011, I wrote an article for DefenseReview.com, Military Marksmanship Training versus Competitive Shooting Training, an article basically pro-competitive shooting that it will help those in the tactical community and make you a better shooter. Now, again, when I started competitive shooting around 2002, and really, I would say up until the late 2000s, many in the tactical shooting community, not just in Special Forces, were against competitive shooting. Again, it would build training scars. It was for gamers, and a lot of those things are going to get you killed because you're not reinforcing any tactics. You're not using cover. But luckily, I would say in the last 10 years, there's been a shift in that, yes, tactical shooters do see competitive shooting aiding them and making them better shooters. And there's a correlation that I observed between a lot of Green Berets that had done a lot of competitive shooting and where they ended up in Special Forces. Now, of course, Due in part to the skills I gained in competitive shooting, I ended up being the head flat range, the marksmanship instructor for Range 37 Sephardic for about 2 years, 2007, 2008. But going back in time, when I was a student myself back in 2002 at Sephardic, my instructor was a guy named Super Dave Harrington. And his nickname was Super Dave because he had earned that nickname on the competitive shooting side. He was a heavy hitter in IDPA and USPSA. So although it wasn't widely accepted and I never even thought of competitive shooting, this guy, Dave Harrington, Green Beret, had been doing it, I don't know when he first started, but he was doing it through the 90s. So yes, I'm not the first Special Forces guy to try competitive shooting and endorse it. There were many before me. But Super Dave Harrington, he was the head marksmanship instructor when I went through as a student. In 2007, I was the head marksmanship instructor, and a lot of my peers that shot a lot of matches, Ben Fortin, the fifth grouper who started shooting matches with me in the early 2000s, he would go on to run 5th Special Forces Group SFAUC program. That is the Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat Program. Basically, it's a combat course for Green Berets. Every group has their own. Clay Martin, who represented third group on the Adams Arms team, a heavy hitter in third group, he would run third group's SFAUC program for a while. There's a gentleman named Dan Brokos. He was a 10th grouper, went through part of the Q course with him. He can bring it on the range, and he shot pistol matches from time to time. He ended up being the Sergeant Major of Sephardic, so he was running the show. He endorses competitive shooting. So there's a correlation of all these Green Berets who were excelling in their careers in Special Forces and taking over head teaching jobs within Special Forces to teach their peers how to shoot better. And how did they gain some of these skills of being able to crush it out on the flat range? Well, again, it was from shooting matches. So I can think of no better endorsement. Does shooting matches help you tactically? I would say, again, it goes back to your marksmanship skills. Definitely yes. Now, you're not going to learn tactics from shooting matches. You're not going to learn how to use cover, even in IDPA. When soldiers go and shoot IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association matches, where you have to use cover, you have to use some sort of individual tactics. Most soldiers who go out and shoot those matches, they get crushed on penalties because Army tactics are very offensive in nature, and Army tactics are really built around a team, not individual. So when guys try to IDPA, and I shot IDPA for a while, I made master years ago, it's a very hard transition because those tactics don't line up. So even if you could incorporate tactics into a match, are they the right tactics to begin with? And again, what you're going to get out of competitive shooting is being able to balance speed and accuracy. And he who can hit first or the fastest in combat is always better off. So yes, you're not going to get tactics out of shooting matches, but it's going to raise your marksmanship ability significantly, in my opinion. And if you're looking for more endorsements, a lot of your former Tier 1 Delta guys, there's many of them that also support competitive shooting. Guys like Larry Vickers, you have Pat McNamara. I used to run into him out at the unit matches when they used to put on USPSA pistol matches. Kyle Lamb, yes, everybody knows him from Viking Tactics and his book Green Eyes, Black Rifle, but he used to put on major 3-gun matches in the early 2000s. It was the Kyle Lamb Viking Tactics 3-gun, back when 3-gun was truly outlaw. So you have a lot of top tier guys that also have done a lot of competitive shooting, so I don't think you get a better endorsement as to whether or not competitive shooting can help tactical shooters than these, of course, heavy hitters who shoot and support matches. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and, again, try and become a championship competitive shooter, but go out and shoot a local match from time to time just to see where you stand. If anything, it's going to highlight your weaknesses and what you need to work on. Now, if there are any tactical instructors or tactical personalities out there that still poo-poo competitive shooting, well, it can only be one of two reasons, and I will stand by this 1,000%. If there's still tactical guys that still are against competitive shooting, it's one, because they've never tried it and they don't understand it, and they only see pictures of guys out there with their race guns, or they've tried it and frankly they sucked at it, they got their feelings hurt, so they poo-poo it now as writing it off, saying, hey, it adds no value. And that's the only reasons why I can still see some tactical guys out there saying, no, competitive shooter is not going to help you. Because believe it or not, I survived 6 tours of combat in Special Forces, despite some of my peers telling me way back in the early 2000s that competitive shooting, this gamer stuff's going to get you killed in combat. I've excelled in my career. I ended the career, I think, at the top of my game, and I had a great time. And competitive shooting has really aided me in making me the shooter I am today. So I cannot endorse competitive shooting enough. Again, don't go out and throw all this money at buying the best gamer stuff, but hey, take your duty style stuff and go out and maybe try a match once in a while. If you noticed in a lot of my 3-gun pictures, I'm wearing a war belt, and that's the same style belt I wear in combat. So I'd keep it real a little bit, and I'd run some duty gear. I started out with I would say a duty style rifle, and I ended up going full race rifle because my ego does want me to do well at matches, so I'm just not looking solely for the training aspect of it, of building up my marksmanship capability. I do like to have fun, and I do like to try and win. Again, I'm not a heavy hitter anymore. The best I can do at a local match is top 10, but I still love hitting local matches. Where does it stand now? Well, in the very beginning, I talked about probably the first, I would say, 5 or 6 years I was shooting matches. No matter where I went, there'd only be a handful of active duty military guys out there, maybe 5 or 6 out of 50 shooters. Well, in the last, I would say, at least 5 years, here around the Fort Liberty or Fort Bragg area, the matches are inundated with military personnel. So much so, sometimes at a local match with 60 shooters, half the field is active duty military. A lot of Special Forces guys, a lot of guys in the Q course, a lot of team guys, and I love seeing them out there. One, I like seeing them getting their gun on, making themselves better by shooting these matches. And 2, I get to feel like one of the boys, at least for a little while, shooting around the current generation of Green Berets that are hitting these matches. So I get to feel like a cool guy, even just for a little bit, because, I'm a retired, former action guy now. So there it is, the history of competitive shooting as I saw it throughout my career, which I started shooting matches in 2002 up until I retired in 2017. Again, I still hit local matches. If you're in North Carolina and you see me at a match, by all means, come up and say hi to me. Heck, jump in my squad and shoot with me. I love hanging out and talking to fellow gun nuts. But as always, hopefully you found this video entertaining and informative. I'm Jeff Gerwich. Thanks for watching.